Welcome back, everyone, to the PetaPixel podcast. It's me, Jordan Drake, joined by my good friend, Chris Nichols, and
hi.
Jaron's out. He's got a family emergency, unfortunately, so we called in a pinch hitter. Is that the right phrase in baseball? I don't know. We got our friend Ted Forbes, the living legend from the Art of Photography YouTube channel, is going to have a conversation with us about some of the worst things that we've ever seen on press trips and trade show floors over the years. We got some cool news coming up. Apple finally announced their M3 chips. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. We've got some potential, not fraud, but some interesting things going on in a photo contest that we definitely want to talk about.
More photo contest drama.
And of course, we've got Don't Read the questions, comments, and tech support. So we'll be looking at some of those as well. It's going to be a great show. Let's get it going.
All right, once again, we would like to thank our sponsor, OM System, who makes the PetaPixel podcast possible. Last week, we talked about OM System celebrating a big milestone, their second anniversary since acquiring the Olympus brand name. To celebrate this milestone, they're calling it OM System Day, and they're running an absolutely incredible getaway. So, unfortunately, Jordan and I, we're not eligible to win. We're very sad about that, even though we tried. I think, Jordan, you went under Gordon Blake, trying to get. I went with Bliss Rickles.
I set up a brand new Gmail account just in the hopes that I could swindle my way into this contest, but they flagged it.
You are deceptive. I will give you that. You're a deceivious man. But it didn't work. So that means that everybody else, you have even more chances to win. So, PetaPixel podcast listener, you're going to win an OM5 kit, an incredible piece of photography gear, and also a once-in-a-lifetime experience and adventure. It's a 5-day Lindblad expedition for two. Take either Jordan or myself. I mean, I don't know. We'll see which one you pick, and we'll fight.
No, they even put in the fine print. People aren't allowed to invite us. It's totally.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I know.
Anyways, it is an amazing trip for two to Iceland on the National Geographic Explorer ship. Pretty amazing stuff. So this is on until November 13th. So you got to head over to explore.omsystem.com/petapixel, share what nature means to you, and then get your chance to experience this once-in-a-lifetime adventure. And I know, Jordan, you and I talked about this last time. We've never been to Iceland. But what about you, Ted? You're a world traveler. Have you been?
Never been to Iceland, so
I don't even see your name in this list of people who are disqualified. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, Ted Forbes, you should totally
will disqualify you, but this could be your shot.
This could be my thing. Yeah, I'm ready to go. I've got my bag packed right now. So
you should put in an entry, and then we'll just make sure that you win. And then we can talk about it on the podcast as another sort of big drama thing in the photo world.
Yeah, we'll have you back.
Famous
on
YouTuber gets nepotism gift to go to Iceland. Yeah.
Is it nepotism if we're unrelated, or is it just calling in favors? I don't know what.
Are you saying that we're not related to Ted, even by a spiritual brotherhood
from
bond?
Another mother? That's the
yeah, man. He says it all the time. Every time he sees us.
That's right,
Jordan. I'm sorry, Ted. You and I are brothers. Don't worry about him.
I think the point you're trying to get across is this is an awesome opportunity for our listeners.
Yes,
and they should definitely go check out.
Not any of us to win a trip to Iceland. It is an amazing experience. Go do it. Go do it right now. It costs you nothing.
All right, guys, let's get this going. So we've got some pretty big news that just broke last night. It's funny. I was talking to a few people when I heard Jaron wasn't going to be able to make it on the show about coming on. One of them was Tyler Stallman. And he's like, oh, man, I can't. I'm busy. And now it turns out we know why, because he was at the M3 launch event that happened last night in Cupertino. Chris, you want to rattle off some of the stuff that they announced?
Well, so the big thing, of course, is going to be this brand new chip, the M3 series chip. We've seen M1, we've seen M2. They've been very effective, right? I mean, they've been integrated all on the chip level, graphics built in, but now they're just taking it to the next level. I expect, like any Apple launch, it was probably, a whole bunch of 2 times better, 3 times faster.
Oh, of course,
They love their multiplication factor.
With so many asterisks after those statements. I love it.
But it's now using 3 nanometer technology. They've got the M3, the M3 Pro, Pro and then the M3 Max. And these are basically promising, roughly upwards of 35 to 40% improvements over the old M2 chips, which are already incredibly fast. And I think the other big thing that I'm excited about, it looks like they're improving the graphics. This seems to be a big push for Apple lately. We saw that with the iPhone 15 with ray tracing support. Now these chips are going to have ray tracing support built into the M3 chips. So that's pretty cool.
The one thing I'm really curious about is that any benefit for doing like CGI work, any kind of generation like that, or is this just for gamers? Because whenever I hear about ray tracing, it's just like, yeah, it's really, really good for video games, but it's just seems like that's such a funny thing for them to put that much effort into, unless they're really going to go hard on gaming in the next year. But
I mean, we're talking about mesh shading. There's hardware accelerated ray tracing. I mean, I don't know. I think they're really going for the gaming market. I don't know if Apple wants to do something like Microsoft did, where they start buying video game companies and building their own sort of stable of digitally based gladiator stables to put out all these different games and make tons of money. And it makes sense too, because they got such a big production side for movie making and TV show making. And I mean, That's basically what video games are nowadays.
Ted, what's the last time, because you're an Apple guy, right? What's your most recent machine?
Is what I'm hoping for. Mesh shading in Tetris is important
finally.
To me. I have to say, I'm both now, but I do video editing on Windows, and that may come as a shock. I'm sorry, Jordan.
You're crazy.
It's okay.
Well, the funny thing is, 10, 15 years ago, I never thought I would say that. But the NVIDIA processors have gotten so good with export, and the way the DaVinci Resolve integrates into that has been delightful. And I've just kind of stopped using Macs for that. Now, I do have an iMac in here, but what's exciting to me about this is that we now have iMacs that have come out. And we had iMacs before, but they're always kind of too small, and I tend to not go Gen 1 on things because it's one thing if you just, have a computer that you work on, and it's another thing when you're running a business. And so I tend to just wait a generation, and I've had to wait a while on iMacs. And are you an iMac guy, Jordan?
So I wasn't. I only bought laptops pretty much the entire time I've been using editing video, until when we were like a year into COVID, and I'm hunched over my laptop and I'm like, I might be the biggest dummy alive, because I've been just hoping one day that I would be able to take this thing out, press trips would resume, and I'd be editing on the go again. So I bought that's right when the M1s came out. So that was my first integrated Apple Silicon computer. And the difference was colossal. The export time differences weren't dramatically different. It's the actual experience of editing. It's just instant and seamless. There's no beach balls. It was a huge difference. So yeah, it's nice to see things getting a little faster. I actually kind of thought Apple might be moving away from the iMacs, because the 27 still hasn't been updated. And then, we didn't see anything for the M2. Now we've got a new version with the M3, which is nice. It's a better computer. I was really hoping they'd update the display, because now the iMac is one of the very few Apple things with the screen that's not a full HDR display. It's pretty bright. It's like 600 nits, I think, but it's not a full HDR, PQ certified Dolby Vision display.
Right.
And I'd love to have that. I would love to make the show an HDR show. We've experimented with that, and
it's a rocky road.
Yeah,
you can. You just need to buy a very expensive monitor. It's
I could do that. I mean, it might make more sense.
All your viewers have to buy a really expensive monitor. Is what has to happen. Doesn't matter for us. It's them. They have to do it.
I'd love to see a 27 that's a proper HDR display. And then also, they're not putting any of the M3 Pro or the Pro Max in the iMac. It's just an M3. So we're never going to get a super fast unit. So I don't know. I might hold off, just keep updating laptops for the time being. But I do think that the iMac is a lovely background behind me.
It is, but the thing is you mentioned one thing, which is the travel aspect of it. And I think for most people, having something that's portable and small is really important. For the kind of work that we all three do, whether it's photo editing or video editing, real estate is something that's really important to me. I need a large screen, ideally. It's just not, I have trouble when you get into photo editing and particularly video editing when it's small. Yeah. So it's something I hope that Apple are serious about continuing, just simply for the size. Of course, you can plug it into a monitor, and I've done that, but
Yeah. I would love
or you
to
could just get a Gigabyte Aero. Fantastic, powerful, noisy
loud,
laptop.
the loudest laptop.
Yeah, but like loud like a
to take off.
Yeah, loud like a muscle car is loud, or loud like a jet fighter is loud.
Nobody
like, cool.
podcasts from a muscle car.
Gee, I do. I'm the Tom.
I was going to do that just to surprise you guys. Yeah.
The one other thing I wanted to touch on that was really cool, and I didn't catch this when I was just skimming through the announcements, is the entire thing, which still looked really good. It's Apple's usual high production values, was shot on an iPhone 15 Pro. So
I did see that this morning. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been so impressed with the log output from that. We used it again in a recent episode, just as, whenever we need a little safety or something like that, shoot it on the iPhone. It grades beautifully. It's incredibly
still a little
impressive
over-sharpened look, though. But, I mean, if you light things properly and run it through some filters and stuff, it looks good.
Yeah, and if you have a giant post-production house.
We haven't really talked since, for those who don't know, we were all at the Apple launch event for iPhone 15, and we got to hang out there a bit. And it's since then, when you actually get home and have time to use the camera system on it, I mean, I've been very impressed with it. I do find what Chris said, though, is typically an issue, and I would hate to have their job where you're trying to make it easy to use for everyone, whether they know what they're doing or not. Yeah. But the result is especially with HDR processing, is there always is a little of that plastic skin. It just looks a little phony, and I'm constantly like trying to lower the exposure, or, to deal with that. But you're right, the log footage does open it up, and it gives you, options with that. You're kind of not locked into a specific color look that's burned in. So
yeah, totally.
But yeah, it is cool. Yeah.
Chris, what's our next news story?
Okay, so back to some controversy and some drama in the photo competition world. So there's a big photo award, CEWE, went off in Hamburg, Germany, which I'd love to visit, by the way. And it's a huge, sort of worldwide competition, entries from everywhere. Anyways, the winning competition, first off, $25,000. That's what they won.
Sweet.
Yeah, the photographer who won the world's largest photo competition here, the CEW Photo Awards, did it with a staged photo. And it wasn't even just a staged photo that they had just done themselves. It was actually kind of a workshop. There was lots of other photographers there shooting, kind of almost like a press trip where, they hire models and set up and everything's lit for you. And then you can kind of go in and take some shots. I mean, it's still a fantastic photo, absolutely. And before we get into it, I guess the thing I'd want to start it with is the part about it being staged, to me, isn't such a big deal because lots of photography is staged. I mean, every studio shoot is staged, right? I mean, so that part doesn't really upset me so much, but really maybe more so the controversy comes down to the pretense that it was entered under.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ted, you do the art of photography. This is totally in your wheelhouse. What's your opinion on this?
I have several. I think one, Chris made the comment that a lot of photography is staged. I've made the argument before that I think, if you're looking for pure truth in photography, I think pretty much all of it is staged to some degree because it's interpreted by a photographer. And, we've seen in the past, there's been news outlet stories where, something was cropped out that was kind of essential to the information of the story that was being communicated. So that doesn't surprise me. And I don't have strong feelings about it. The photo is nice. It is obviously professionally lit, so I don't know why it's a big shock to people. And this is something that is going to persist too, because with the advent of AI and all Instagram wants to do when I go into the recommended section is recommend AI shots to me because I've looked at two of them. And so, and there is, I think a lot of people feel, very strongly about the being lied to. This is real when it's not kind of thing. But the other curious thing to me, though, is I've just never understood the point of photo competitions. I've never viewed photography as a competition. When you look at the art aspect of photography, it's simply a documentation of where you are as an artist and creatively where your headspace is at the time. So I used to be asked to judge competitions a lot. And I actually stopped doing that probably about 6-7 years ago, because what you would do is you get into things. And this, I can't imagine doing it now with AI processing, but I would get in there and you'd see people that looked a little too much like a well-known photographer with their landscape photography, or, there wasn't a whole lot of creativity or originality to it. And I just don't understand the point of the competition. I mean, they're not going to go away, but it's something that I just don't feel strongly connected to. And I think as a premise, it sets itself up for news stories like we're talking about now, where you're going to have something that nobody agrees with. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I would say like half of our podcast, one of the news stories is something along these lines.
Right.
One thing that did occur to me is, like Chris mentioned, we see these all the time on press events where something's pre-set up. They hire the models for you. You go in. You can still interact with them and, find a way to modify the image yourself. But we have folders of these. So, Chris, you should just submit all of those to all of the photo competitions and see if like Sony's lighting or Nikon's lighting can get you a few grand. I think that would be a great way to go. Or at the very least, inspire a little controversy. Get your name in the news.
We ought to use it for something, because actually that is an interesting point. When we do these press trips, we're all shooting the same thing. And that's one thing I can't stand about it, because I won't ever use those photos for anything after the initial press run, because I've seen Fro's photos, I've seen your photos, or whoever, but we might as well throw spaghetti against the wall and see if we can get some press out of it, though, right?
It's funny because, like, in those situations where they have lit everything, like, first off, I want to say, like, that's great, from the standpoint of testing the gear that we're testing and stuff. It's nice to have beautiful models and professional lighting, or nice locations. Absolutely, 100%. That's great, and we do often take the models and we go off and do other work as well separately. I like the photos that I get from those, but I don't think I've ever taken one of the shots in those setups and be like, oh, I want to like keep this or put it on my wall or anything like that, Whereas another picture that I just took out on the streets in that same city, I'm probably far more proud of and far more likely to enjoy. And that's just me personally. Like, I'm not trying to poop on it, but it's the same idea with this contest, right? I mean, there's no doubt the craft is there, the photography is good, timing, angle. You can't say that it was just the lighting or it's just the setup. I mean, there's still some skill involved. Absolutely. I think, as you said, Ted, it's really more just when they say like, oh, this was taken with real, like, Indonesian cafe owners in a traditional Indonesian cafe, it wasn't. That's a little disingenuous, right? And so, why not just come out and say like, hey, a professionally lit setup, your photo is still very powerful. It's very interesting. It's very compelling. And they did some other shots too, like outside on the street and stuff with models. And again, it looks great. It looks beautiful. There's nice photos from it, different scenes. So I have no problem
for what
with
it
that.
is. Yeah.
It's more just like when you start to say, oh, this was taken, and imply that it was taken on the street and it's real people, like, in a real life setup. I could see how then people who actually do street photography and look for these scenes and wait for the light can feel like, well, that's not fair. Like, I actually like waited for golden hour and then sat at this crossing and it just, took hundreds of shots where it never worked. And then this one day it did. And I love it. I have a lot of respect for that, the work that's going involved in the dedication there.
I do want to call you out very briefly, Chris, in saying that you don't have any photos from press events that you cherish, because I'm pretty sure, I forget his name, I think it was like Josh or something, the Canon model. You have a folder on, you have a folder of photos of him on your desktop. That I'm sure you just like reach enjoyment. To. Yeah, okay.
Thanks for pointing that out. That's private. That's just between me and Josh doesn't know. So like, why would you?
I hope he's still listening. That's
Josh
my
is a beautiful man, and but again, it's that same thing where it's like Josh was there. He's hired as a model to do the stuff for us, but we like took him off into other locations, and it wasn't like a setup shot, and and we became friends, and like. He got all James Bonded in a tux and he looked so handsome. And I liked a lot of those shots too. So anyways, I love you, Josh. And I hope you're doing well. And he's a veteran. Dude, just don't get me started. Anyways, let's get on to our next story on that note. Thanks, Jordan.
No problem. The king of segues.
Are we going to talk about Sony and Canon's best inventions of 2023?
I mean, I thought the choices were interesting. What did you think, Ted?
Yeah, I thought the choices were interesting too. It's very reflective, I think, of where the industry has been. All these cameras are amazing anymore. And Sony clearly has done just some mind-blowing stuff, especially with autofocus and speeds. And being also having a division that makes the sensors. The stack sensor was probably one of the greatest innovations of the last 20 years. So, it was interesting choices, but I tend to... It may be because I work in the industry and I do keep up with what's out, and then also having practical experiences, what I enjoy and what my needs are as a photographer. I don't pay as much attention to stories like that come out, so I might not be the best person to talk to on that. But I don't know. Did you have any initial reactions, Jordan, on that, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, my big reactions to it are they picked these based on being able to write like a compelling story, like it's time, right? So they're like, oh, the A7R5, because when it came out, the headline was, we have AI technology in our autofocus, which is just machine learning, the same thing everyone else is doing. It just has a dedicated processor for it. But it's a great story. Yeah, AI, we can say, hey, AI, brilliant invention. And the same thing with the FX3. Like they have that movie, The Creator, which was shot on FX3. Yeah. So they can say like, hey, this little camera will replace Hollywood movie cameras. But that's largely a film that's made, with special effects. Like you're not seeing a lot of imaging from that camera itself. They just needed something small they could move easily. So I just thought those were kind of odd choices. The Canon camera is compelling. I just haven't really seen any like you'd think with something that's so good in low light by now, we would have started to see, this is incredible footage that's unlike anything we've seen before. Yeah. And I have even their announcement footage for that was nothing spectacular in my estimation, but maybe I think it's Apple is doing that like Wildlife at Night series or something like that. Maybe they're shooting a series on that camera right now and we'll all be blown away by it in the future. It's just sure. They all seem like odd choices to me.
Yeah. That, at least with the Canon camera, it's inspirational, right? Because it's like a new technology, it's a new design, something we haven't seen before, and so that's quite exciting. I mean, again, I'm all for the A7R5. I think at least they chose solid cameras. The FX3, the A7R5 are fantastic tools. But before we get into that, can we go back and just start a petition to end this whole abuse of AI?
Yes.
Not artificial intelligence. I'm all for abusing artificial intelligence, making them our robot sex slaves and doing all our work for us. I'm totally cool with that. What I just don't like the whole calling deep learning or machine learning techniques AI. Ugh.
It's a bit ridiculous. Of a stretch.
I mean, like this just showed up for us. This is the Fuji GFX 100, and I saw so many headlines of like medium format finally gets AI, because the autofocus, that's what Fujifilm's calling it. No. It's just machine learning based. I mean, it's
it's as bad as when Fujifilm were calling that large format at one point. It's not.
I feel like we're singling Fuji because we talked about them last week as well.
And
everybody's doing this. Yeah,
I'm not singling Fuji out because I could say this with every camera company to some degree. And look here, I get it because you've got technology that has been really good for I'd say the last, especially like 5 or 6 years, has been really good, right? And you've got to sell that, and you've got to sell a new camera every year and every month in Sony's case, and so there needs to be marketing around that, and I get it totally, but
it worked because Time called it Gadget of the Year. Like it totally worked. Well done, Sony. Yeah. You've misrepresented something, and it was great for your marketing team.
I guess it comes down to though, like if you made a movie about machine learned databases taking over the world, it just doesn't have the same cachet.
That's true.
So I get it. It's just not very exciting. It's like,
even Terminator. I mean,
but that was
this
AI.
Machine
right?
seems to be learning dramatically. That'd be amazing.
Oh man! All right. Let's move on to our last story here before we get to our comments. Giggster has acquired photo website ePhotozine. Another website with zine in it. That's amazing. So
zines.
Giggster, for people that don't know, is an online studio space rental company. So it's interesting they're diversifying. But ePhotozine is like it was a big
They've been around for
online
a long time.
Photography platform. It's been live for like over 20 years. So it's interesting to see all these. I mean, we saw the acquisition with DP Review, of course. We all know that intimately. So it's interesting to see how the industry is kind of changing and evolving.
Well, I think what's interesting here is Giggster wanted an online publication because they tried to get Imaging Resource and Outdoor Photographer. And we've talked about that before, how there's now a lawsuit still pending over that. I mean, it just seems like an absolute dumpster fire of a situation. So I think they were just like, well, you know what? There's this other website. It's a 2-person team. They can acquire that. And I think they just really want to have some kind of presence. I don't know if they have a very active forum. I know they did at one point. But yeah, they want to have that connection with the photography community. I think they were like, look, we can go the Imaging Resource and deal with endless lawsuits from Bebop, or let's just grab these other guys here and probably step away from the other potential acquisition.
I mean, I assume at this point they just want like a marketing branch. They want like a vector to market their company and be part of the community. So yeah.
I think it's just nice to hear about an acquisition, not a website shutting down, which is what we were seeing. Yeah. There was that bad stretch where every other week it was another photography site shutting down. And this year it seems like it's a lot of them just moving their banners around.
Well, the interesting thing to me is there's clearly value in all of those as brand names because people are interested in acquisition, whether or not it's legal or not, or they get sued. I mean, but there's an interest there. But it's also interesting to me because at the same time, it's a lot of brands that are willing to sell. And I don't know if this is the same case for everyone individually, and I don't know the situation behind Giggster or ePhotozine or any of those. But it's a tough space because it's crowded. When you're talking about websites anymore, I mean, all of us have found a way because we participate on YouTube and social media. And, I think that's kind of more it is. And we're all individuals too. We're not like, a brand name that we all kind of masquerade under. I mean, people know who we are. So it's a weird time in the business. And I can't help but think that maybe this means that it is moving in a certain direction. It's just, where is that? But,
it's worth pointing
Giggster though.
Yeah, good luck to them. I just worry that ePhotozine will become less. I mean, we'll see, right? Is it going to become less forum, less camera reviews, lens reviews, and more just like, hey, check out Giggster. There's a commercial space tailored to your shoot near you kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, again, they bought it. They could do what they want with it. So I'm kind of curious to see what will actually come out of this. Will ePhotozine stay the way it is with just this Giggster acquisition, or is it going to be used as a skeleton ship to launch in a completely different direction? We'll see.
Yeah, I would think that, you get the brand. I don't know what the viewership is, there's a lot of numbers that would be reviewed in a situation like that with an acquisition. But all I can tell you is of my experience. I can't remember the last time I hung out over at ePhotozine in the forums and and that's not, I'm careful of how I say that because I end up knowing people inevitably who work for these places, and it's not an insult to anybody. It's just, I think it's a changing landscape. And
it's fair to say that Outdoor Photographer and Imaging Resource would have been a larger traffic acquisition, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a better known names, but more hassle for sure. Yeah. It's worth pointing out as well, Chris and I are working for PetaPixel, who's still independent, which is kind of cool. Yeah. They're not owned by anyone. So
I think that's the way it should be. Yeah, that's awesome.
Till Sony buys us out. A7R5, Time Magazine, one of their best 2023 inventions. Technology.
Autofocus.
I get a 64 gigabyte tough card every time I say A7R5 on camera. Did you guys know that?
You don't get one. You just take one every time.
Precedence? Yeah. We all do. Come on. Don't act like now. You're so... Yeah. Let that who's not guilty throw the first memory card at me.
I think we should move to our main story, guys.
Let's do that. Speaking of press trips, and we thought we'd go a bit different way with our main story here because we have Ted Forbes with us, and we are talking about some of the experiences. We're going to go with, let's start with negative experiences for this episode.
I mean, we're calling it the worst. Yeah.
The worst experiences and things that we've seen just happen on press trips. I think it's always fun to see behind the candelabra of our amazing press trips and see what happens. So let's get started with some terrible stories.
I want to kick things off with just like the most bizarre, and I'm going to talk about NAB quite a bit, which is the National Association of Broadcasters. It's like the video big trade show, and it is it's all dudes pretty much exclusively attending, which is very unfortunate, which means it has a lot of those relics of the past of trade shows, which most of the industry has kind of moved on from. And the weirdest, just like, who is responsible for this idea that I could come up with right off the top is Olympus back in the day had a high-speed video camera that they were selling for like commercial applications. So it's like, how do you demonstrate that? Do we get like a welder or something like that? And someone said, no, we're going to put girls in bikinis in a big glass tube, and you're going to fire jelly beans at them with like air cannons. And then afterwards, you'll be able to take the footage of them like at 300 frames per second, like, oh no, not another jelly bean, like ricocheting off of their face.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah.
Wow.
Like
Ouch.
So many components that just, I wouldn't immediately be like, slow-mo, we need bikini plus jelly bean plus tube plus.
Well,
Like,
Jordan,
plus what a waste of
also,
jelly beans.
You also have to remember that, like, you know, it's a trade show. People pay money for the booze. It's a company. It's a corporation, actually. So this means that this idea actually went through probably 2 or 3 people, and they're like, yeah, good one.
There was a committee.
Yeah.
One
this idea, which clearly
was like, what if we launched the jelly beans?
Yeah, and this idea was clearly born over too much alcohol at a restaurant table.
Oh my God.
Like, hey, you know, it'd be great. Yeah.
I got an idea.
Man. I got an idea. Wouldn't that be funny? And then someone's like, let's do it. We'll make it happen. And then maybe it was just too late. They were like already into it. They're like, deadline's tomorrow. We
How much to build this? Yeah, $500,000. Like, great. It's a steal.
Okay. Put the girls in bikinis and we're a go.
Oh man,
It's bad.
And you have a lot of horrible stories from NAB, Jordan. It seems I've never been. You've been a few times. We've tried multiple times to get me to get to one. Yeah. It's just never worked out. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm probably good.
It's changing too, because most of these are from a few, like, you know, like 5 to 10 years ago, right, when things were a little wilder. But
things are getting better.
They are. I just want to throw out one very quick thing, we don't have to dwell on it, is Shape, a company that makes rigs, actually made outfits for the women working in their booth, exclusively women. They were just wearing like things made out of 15 mil rails and 1/4 cheese plates and things like that to cover their no bits. And like, just looking at it, you're wincing, because it's like there's 18 different pinch points. And when you're building a rig, how often are you just like, ow, and you look down and you've got a bloody finger? Right? Like,
and it's cold aluminum, and it's like
it's cold.
Heavy. It's probably quite heavy, you know, to cover someone enough rigging that they're not, you know, breaking any laws. So yeah, that's dude.
Okay, why don't you guys go, and I'll loop back with more NAB.
Should I go with something happier, and then I'll let Ted kick in here?
Do it.
It's worst. Make sure it's not too happy.
No, I'm going to try to keep it happier. Well, anything's happier than that. Oh man,
Levity Nichols.
So one of the biggest. I don't know, what do I want to say? Upsets that I ever had on this happened to be a Sony press trip in San Francisco, and I think you were there, Ted.
Yeah, it was
24.
One of the biggest upsets that I had is Sony took us to this beautiful Chinese restaurant, you know, in San Francisco, really nice. And what we got to do is we got to make our own dumplings. So they had all the kit out there, the wonton wrappers and all those, you know, we cut vegetables and stuff. And for people who don't know, I like to make homemade gyoza. I think it's amazing, you know, family
How would they
recipe.
know that?
That's why I'm telling you. I don't.
If you haven't read my autobiography, then
if people pay attention to me, they probably know. Anyways, we make homemade gyoza. It's great. And so I wanted to make these dumplings, and then at the end, everybody's having fun. It's great, you know, all sticky fingers, whatever. And then it's like, oh, we're not going to cook those. No, now we're going to throw them in the garbage and take you guys over to another meal. And I'm like, just the utter disappointment. Everybody's like, no, I want to fry these and eat them. Like,
they're like, these are not up to code. Yeah, they're just worried, like, our gross camera reviewer fingies are going to give us some sort of terrible infection.
I have photographs of Chris making those dumplings too. I'll send them to you later. Yeah, because I remember that specifically. This woman comes over and she clearly knew what she was doing. I thought she was some master chef, and everybody was into this. I mean, the whole table.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, it was cool. Everybody standing around. I couldn't wait to get a turn. No, we're not going to eat these. Well, then why did we make them? It was just weird.
It broke my heart. I mean, look, The food was great. I mean, it was fine, but I mean, I made those dumpling babies and someone just threw them in the garbage. You know, it's sad. It's very sad. So that struck me to the core, but it's not jelly beans and shapewear.
What do you got, Ted?
Well, it's funny. You have triggered my memory because when you talk about old school trade shows, and it is worth noting that we have seen a major shift in this right around the time of COVID. I think it put a lot of things to bed that probably, but I mean, NAB will persevere, but I used to go. I remember it was around the time, I think it was 2013 or 2014, and I had made the decision that I was going to leave my job and I was going to do YouTube full time. And so I was trying to figure out what to do and be around people that were kind of in the business. And so I went to Vegas for this conference. I took my wife to called Blog. It used to be Blog World, and they changed the name to something else, New Media Expo. Anyway, so we go, and it's just kind of it's a wild mix of stuff. They had big name bloggers who were there at the time, but then they also had podcasting was on its first wave, and so it was a really wild mix of stuff, and it was cool. But their keynote speaker was this guy named Marshall Silver, who you'll have to go look up. He's a hypnotist and a very sleazy. Anyway, that was interesting. And I volunteered to go on stage and be hypnotized, and I didn't trust the dude. And so I kept looking out of my eye, and he saw me, so he threw me off stage. But the weirdest thing that happened on this whole thing is there's always the classes you can take and all this stuff. Then there's the trade show floor. And I don't know what's going to be on the trade show floor at a blog festival, but anyway, so we go out there
everywhere.
Oh yeah. Well, and we were near the back, so Nicole and I were like the first two out there, and this woman just descends upon us, and she says, "Oh, okay, have you heard of ultraviolet blah 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 or whatever?" And so she sits us down, and all of a sudden, next thing I know, there's pamphlets in my lap, and they do ultra UV teeth whitening, right? Which I wasn't really familiar with. It. Okay, well, you're going to get free whitening today, blah blah blah. I just got to go get the machine, and we're looking at brochures. She's getting the machine. I'm like, I'm imagining myself with no enamel coming out of that show floor, and so we split. I look around and she's trying to find us like they really wanted to whiten their teeth. But anyway, that was an ultra creepy experience at a trade show. That was
that hasn't happened to us yet on a press trip. I can see Nikon's like, all right, everyone, here's your dentist.
We are your new dentist.
I thought this was going down a road where you buck like a chicken, and you couldn't stand up, and then you were convinced you were the president of Guatemala or something.
Well, people were doing that on stage, and Marshall Silver was he's such a huckster. I mean, he talking about a rainmaker dude. I mean, show up in town, and he had his book out, and we to this day we have 3 copies of that stupid book. I don't know how we went up to 3, but we did. So that was
how dare you? All magicians are peerless, paragons of society. Stop.
We should all aspire to have the moral code of a hypnotist.
He was the self-help magician, and it was just really bizarre. I mean, it went kind of awry at one point during the keynote. Like people were walking out and throwing their books on stage at him. It was just really bizarre.
I don't think we'll name names, but we won't name names. But on these events, there are some interesting people in our industry, some interesting people that we collaborate with, and some interesting people that we
endure,
talk to, interact with. Try to not interact with, but yeah, I mean, it's a colorful bunch, and honestly, this is all in good fun, but there have been some interesting things there. I mean, one thing I'll say, someone, well, I mean, she won't mind, but somebody convinced me, maybe was it a dare or something? We were in Arizona. You were there, Ted, and we went to a dirt bike track. Does that ring a bell?Maybe not.
This is before my time, because this would have been. Yeah, I know the
camera
trip.
Store days.
Yeah, yes. It was the next trip was my first trip. So we went to a dirt bike track, and I thought it'd be a fun idea, and then was convinced to by a little bit of friendly daring to make motorbike sounds and jump off of a motorcycle ramp. I mean, awesome. Jordan's dad and uncle were big dirt bikers, right? I mean, how high can those jumps be, right, Jordan? I mean, what's the big deal?
It was a very, very high jump. Also, I don't know why people related to me would impact your ability to jump off something.
I don't know, because you're a dirt biking family.
We keep going back to, I guess we're family. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was expecting you to be like, Chris, don't do this. It's a bad idea. That dirt ramp is way higher than you think.
Abandon an opportunity like that.
But instead, you're like, I'm going to get the video camera and shoot in slow mo. Hang on one sec, which you did, and I think it was the D850. Yes. So, anyways, I make motorbike sounds. I launch myself off with my powerful thighs, clear into the air. This thing is like an 11-foot drop to the bottom, and I tuck and roll, and I'm winded, and I cannot breathe. D850 covered in dirt. It survived just great.
Oh, wow.
But, and I was hurting for the next 2 days.
The sound.
I think I like.
You're wearing a lav mic, and you just hear the air being forced from your entire body. It's the worst.
Yes, it's captured for all posterity, and I think I bruised a rib or something. Like, it was bad.
Oh my!
You know what's fun is we can see on the algorithm or on the studio where people have like rewound and rewatched.
Oh yeah, is
it
most replayed? Does it get the most replayed?
The most replayed thing we have ever done.
So it made the final.
Oh, it's in there. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm serious. I'm not joking. Jordan didn't like say don't do it. He said no. Let me get the camera. I'm going to videotape. This could be great. Yeah. So
that's
if if I get attacked by a bear or robbed on the street, just take solace in the fact that you will all get to see it.
Yeah, I'll be like, hold up. Let me switch to 4K 120. Here we go.
Yeah, like robbers. Like,
now
hang
fight
on.
the bear, Chris. Now fight the bear.
Now go. We've had, it is interesting. You said it's colorful. I mean, you can imagine a whole bunch of people who are on camera for a living. There might be an ego or two present at some of these things, and especially, I'm trying to think of anything of note happened at condos, because there's typically not a product at those. That's typically just everybody's
Sony condo trips. Yeah.
Yeah, the Sony condo trips. I haven't been in a while. I don't think you guys have either. But
no.
But yeah, they usually end up with things in the swimming pool, and it's.
My favorite condo thing is I was talking to Dan Bercalia. We just started with DP Review, and it's just like, Sony they're there to promote their brand. That's the purpose of condo, right?
Yes.
So we're just like, oh man, this is feeling just a tiny bit too culty for me right now. And then they were like, everybody get together. We're having a meeting at the chapel.
Yep, I remember that.
They could not have timed it better. It was like, as we were having the conversation, like, everyone get to the chapel. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. And then we're finding out about autofocus actuators. And
it was a motivational talk in a chapel. There was nothing pseudo-religious about it. We were all given books at the end to take home. So wait, it totally was pseudo-religious. Never mind. I take it back. But yeah, I remember even Jordan and I arrived quite late. The condo had already started. Our flight was pretty late. We got in there. It's nighttime. We go in and everybody's sitting at tables. And I think you were supposed to like draw with crayons or markers, like on a drawing, and then push it to the next person, and they would draw and push. And it was this sort of collective, creative orgasm of energy. And I mean, it was fun. It was all in good fun. I mean, we're joking about it, but I mean, it wasn't bad. It was a cool event. Dan got really wasted. That was fun. And we had a few too. But yeah, it was an for your first condo. That was interesting because it was like, wait a minute, do we have to like put markings on our bodies? Is there going to be like a ritual? Is there a seance?
Hang on.
Does that remind you of something?
That is a perfect detail. Oh, what a segue, Chris. You're a master at this.
I know.
I got to go back to the NAB floor. This is going back like 10 years ago when Red brought out their second camera, the Epic. And this is the broiest. Now, Red is still the broiest camera company. GoPro, occasionally I'll give them like a little run for their money, but this is them at the absolute peak of that. And they're like, look, we don't have many units out there. We've got a prototype here on the sales floor. Now, if you want this Red 5K Epic, you have to get a tattoo on the sales floor. I believe it had to be 6 inches minimum of the camera or the Red logo. And then they would film you getting the tattoo in 5K. And you could watch the footage there from the show floor.
In glorious 5K. Yeah.
Yeah. And was all this would do, it's not like you're getting a free camera. This just moves you up the waiting list. That's it.
Wow.
God.
So it's like, you could get your camera 2 months early, and all you'll have to do is, stick that on your body.
Yeah,
just
for the rest of your life. Well, my 7-inch Red tattoo and my footage of jelly beans hitting chicks in the face.
That might have been the same year, those two.
Do you just tell people the rest of your life, like, I just really like the color? Like, it's just my favorite color. It has been since I was 3 years old. That's why I put it on there. Like, yeah.
I hope they just add the new model every time Red makes a new one, and they have the most embarrassing tattoo where it's like red epic, red weapon, red dragon, red bomb.
Yeah, they're running out of supernatural creatures.
Oh man,
but there was a whole kick of that. Like outside of photography, there's like a whole kick of that, right? Like people were like, oh, if you like get a brand name tattooed on your forehead, we'll pay you X amount of dollars and stuff. Like, yeah, it was just wild.
I keep saying I want to reveal in an episode. We kick open the door where Red does their marketing planning for their new product names, and it's just an 8-year-old boy like mashing trucks together. Red bomb.
I actually have a tattoo of it's the Sony A7R5, but it's in a place I can't show you on the podcast. Just so everybody knows.
My!
And I did that for free.
Are we ready to move on, guys?
I guess so. You know what? Before we go to never read the comments, I mean that was great. But before you never read the comments, Ted, what have you been up to lately?
Oh wow, a lot, and hopefully
keep it short, Ted.
Time.
Jeez.
No, it's business as usual. I mean, this is a weird time of the year because it ends up being very work intensive, but we are kind of pivoting. There's some workshop stuff in the mix that is going to happen soon. So I've been having a good time with that and trying to enjoy the last. I have some things to do on my Jeep before winter gets here. This car is 20 years old.
Winter never gets to Texas.
Well, it will in February. We'll get iced over. And
I don't know if you watched the news last year, Chris.
Well, I got caught in hail a few months ago, so it looks like Al Capone took something to the top of my car. It's got holes in the roof. It floods when it rains. It's some work needs to be done, but. Anyway, that's what I've been up to. Is that what you were looking for? I know that's really exciting, but
no, it is super exciting. Yeah, I mean, we've just been going through winter hell here. We had a week of terror, super ice, and desperately throwing winter tires on and all the rest. So we know your pain. What about you, Jordan? What have you been up to?
I'm going to do a recommendation. I like to do these every once in a while. So I was able to watch a movie this week, and I checked out.
Was it one I recommended?
It was not. So. Ev and I watched Past Lives. It's an A24 film from Celine Song, Korean film. And it's kind of a cool premise. It's like a couple of 12-year-olds in Korea went on a date, and then the girl had to move away. They emigrated to Canada, and then she moves to New York, and then they reconnect later after they've both had a lot go on in their lives. And it's kind of cool. They do like an online meeting section that's really compelling, but it's when they actually meet together in person 24 years later that is really beautifully captured, so well acted. Just an absolute, really compelling
What's this called?
It's called Past Lives. And I keep hearing it getting bandied around. They're not sure if they're going to, like, do you run this as a foreign film? Because half of it's in English, half is in Korean. Just super compelling. My wife and I loved it so much. She was like, we need to find more movies similar to this to watch because we enjoyed the vibe so much. So we're going to go through the Before trilogy from Richard Linklater, which I think is like a really, it's Talking Texas, a really cool counterpoint to that. But wonderful movie. You can rent it on Apple TV right now. It's like $6 and totally worth it. I don't think it's playing in many theaters unless you're, in like a major hub, and it's probably already out of those theaters. So
I will endeavor to watch it.
Yeah, it's great.
I'll endeavor to watch it. I promise. But when Jordan first mentioned, I'm like, okay, so it's got zombies in it. And he's like, no. It's like, okay, so somebody dies, and then there's a horrible revenge story that happens over the next month. And he's like, no, none of that happens. I'm like, is this a Korean film?
Yeah.
There's no
Korean films must end in a bloodbath. And I was warning this is really beautiful, but at the end, someone's going to pull out a sword. This is...
Yeah, there's no violent class struggle, nothing like that. It's not like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll watch it. I'm excited.
Chris, what have you been up to?
I haven't been up to anything, of course, but look, it's Halloween, and we're actually recording this episode on Halloween right now. Ted's excited.
Big night tonight?
Go to a party. Huh?
A big night tonight? You taking them trick-or-treating? Or the little one?
Of course, we have small children. You have no choice. It's like, it's
I'm handing out the candy tonight. I'm staying home, but...
Man, our kids do it in like winter parka jackets and snow pants, right? Like that's typically, and it's been cold, although today's not so bad. But yes, that's what I'm looking forward to. And I just want to say, anytime that I hang Halloween decorations, I always use an OM System Olympus 150 to 400, the best tool for hanging Halloween decorations. If you're ever looking to hang your Halloween decorations, I highly recommend the OM System 150 to 400 series of lenses.
$7,500 ghost hanger. It's the best option out there.
See how well it works?
Actually, I have a recommendation. It's an A24 film. This is for Chris.
Oh.
This is going to slake your thirst for violence better. You guys are a little younger than I am, so I don't know if you were into pro wrestling as children.
No.
Was this a thing in Canada?
The golden age of pro wrestling. If we're talking like Macho Man.
Okay.
If we're talking Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, that kind of stuff, like Ted DiBiase.
Just before that, but yeah, that kind of thing. So, all right, here's the deal. Precursor to WWF, Dallas was a hotbed where I grew up of wrestling. And when I was a kid, there was this place called the Sportatorium. It was disgusting. It was falling down, and it had wrestling 5 nights a week. And it was family fun. The church group would take people over there, but you'd see these guys just beat the smack out of each other. There was a family in Texas called the Von Erichs. And it is an interesting story because it was 4 brothers and only one is still living. And so there's this Von Erich curse. So there's a film about this coming out 2 days before Christmas called The Iron Claw. You got to go look up the trailer. If that doesn't change your life,
is it a doc?
It's it's a biopic essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
and
funny.
the guy who plays the chef in what's the name of the movie? Bear or the show Bear?
The Bear. Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, the Bear. Yeah. He's Kerry Von Erich. It's well cast. It's just go watch the trailer. And one thing you would need to know, the only thing you would need to know is he was the Texas Tornado was Kerry's nickname, and right. Rush, Tom Sawyer was his walk-on song. So So
there's Canadian crossover as well.
There is.
That's so funny because it's like we always talk to you, Ted, whenever you're around. We're like, oh, Alberta is the Texas of Canada, right? Straight up. It is. And actually, it's funny because Calgary is the home of Stampede Wrestling, which was our precursor, which a lot of the artists, and Calgary's like a huge wrestling town. And we have our own famous family, the Hart family. And I think again, it was
look this up.
Yeah, and straight up, I think it was like 4 brothers. And I mean, you had, Bret Hart, who is super famous. His brother Owen died in the ring. I mean, I know they've made documentaries about it. I can't remember his other brother's name. He had a couple, but one was like a phys ed teacher.
Yeah, H-A-R-T.
H-A-R-T.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
One of his brothers was a wrestler as well, part-time, never had quite the success, but he was always like a substitute physical education teacher. And you go around to the schools in Calgary, and then, of course, whenever he came, people would be like, oh, show us wrestling moves and stuff like that. What's your brother like? Yada, yada, yada. But, yeah, so it's weird. It's like Texas and Alberta. It's just like
all these parallels, man. I'm telling you, we have extreme heat. You have extreme cold. It's like they just complement one another. And I will say, when you ask what I've been up to, I will say something I've been up to recently. And it was the highlight of my summer was coming up and visiting you guys when we were in Canada. Was that June or July?
Yeah.
1st of July.
July.
So, we flew up there on the 4th of July. So,
had I known, we would have taken you out to some wrestling. All right, let's
next time.
We got a lot of tech support. Let's go, Chris.
So Black Valley emails us, I am a Canon shooter and used the 5D Mark II for many years. I upgraded to the 5D Mark IV in 2019 and had a lot of fun ever since. But in the last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of wildlife shooting with my Sigma 150 to 600, and I found the AF to be fairly inaccurate with moving subjects like flying birds. Do you think this is a camera issue or a lens issue? It got a lot better when I stopped using my ADD and sacrificed effective focal length. If it's a camera issue, would you recommend waiting for the R5 II and its possible improvements over the R5 or just an R5? Thanks and greetings from Germany. Lots to unpack there. Mm-hmm. So one thing I was a little confused about is I think what Black Valley is saying is they like their 5D Mark IV, but they've been shooting wildlife shooting with the 150-600 on an ADD specifically. And not on the 5D Mark IV, right? So I don't know. I do think it's a camera issue for sure, absolutely, as far as autofocus goes. In my opinion, if you get an R5, the autofocus is already really good for wildlife shooting. So although there might be improvements with an R5 too, who knows? I don't think they'll be that drastic because the R5 itself already does a great job with wildlife.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't put the autofocus that they brought out with like the R3, the R6 II, is a little bit more accurate, but mostly we found that with people is where it seems dramatically better. Yeah. one thing I will point out is you've been using a lot of DSLRs for that, and a lot of the time you're going to have focus calibration issues because it's not focusing on the sensor unless you enable live view, where with a mirrorless camera, you are focusing off the chip. So if you want to use that lens, I would not be shocked at all if suddenly you find your hit rate suddenly improving because those micro adjustments aren't going to be a factor anymore for you, which is one of the things I love about mirrorless cameras, even though they give you the option to correct for that still, which I still haven't gotten an answer from a camera manufacturer on why. You know, if you want your images slightly out of focus one way or the other every time. But yes, I do think you will absolutely see that. And the biggest upgrade I would say with mirrorless is the autofocus performance. It's a big step up. And if you're having issues with it, then this might just be the ticket for you.
Ted, anything you want to jump in on there?
I was about to say, I think that just the tech that was just mentioned, with the exception of maybe the Canon, the 4 is even starting to age a little bit. Just moving up to a mirrorless system, I think, is going to just, in terms of autofocus, be a huge surprise there.
You don't get the deep machine learned AI fantastic.
That's right. You know, and actually, I will say this, though. There is nothing wrong with 5D Mark II even to this day. No. I still have mine because it was a special camera when I bought it. And I remember saving my money for a long time because I had nothing. And it did video. And every now and then I'll fire it up and it still takes great pictures. But you know, if you're talking about something that's relatively challenging for autofocus, like birds in flight, I think would probably be one of them. I think moving your technology up a notch is nothing wrong with those cameras, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
All right. Trilwabi. Hi, guys. My first comment ever since I started watching you guys back in 2010. Thanks for the countless hours of entertainment and hugely insightful wisdom you've given all these years.
Thanks for watching.
Tech support directed to Jordan specifically about the Lumix S5 Mark II X.
It's filming me right now.
One. Your favorite one. In my extensive testing with an Atomos Shogun Inferno, I could not find any meaningful difference in IQ between the long GOP and external ProRes 422 HQ. I was wondering, would it make sense to buy the DMW SFU2 Trilwy B for my S5 Mark II so it'll output in higher quality and still record to ProRes 422? In addition to that, does it matter for the quality of the HDMI out signal what recording settings are used? Bitrate, resolution, long GOP, all I. Lots for you to unpack here, Jordan. You have the next 60 minutes to do this.
This is okay. This is going to be nerdy, full disclaimer on it, but I think I can answer these questions a little bit. First of all, going back a ways, video compression used to really determine the quality of your video. You know, a higher data rate meant the video quality was just better. But compression has made absolutely colossal strides. With streaming technology, we need to, move 4K video with a very small amount of file size. So that's come to the cameras as well. And you will not see an image quality difference in most situations recording, external ProRes HQ 422, which are massive file sizes compared to what your camera records internally. Where you may potentially see that is if there's an entire frame filled with irregular motion. But even that is very, very rare right now. The advantage to going with that uncompressed stuff is it is far easier on your computer to work with it, especially if you've got like an older machine, like the Intel Max, for example, had a really tough time rendering that. So shooting ProRes, you'd be able to breeze through it. The trade-off is you had big file sizes. That's less of a concern now. I mean, most computers are going to have something designed to process H.264, H.265, all the stuff your camera records internally very effectively. So I think it's less essential. You mentioned getting the firmware update that unlocks external ProRes RAW recording once you go over there. Now, if you do record and kick that signal out, with a higher data rate, you're not going to see an image quality bump again. I think you're just throwing your data away there. The advantage would be if you do go to external ProRes RAW, you're going to get more flexibility in terms of your noise reduction. It'll give you a sharper image with more noise in it. And you'll be able to push your color a lot more. Same advantage that we see in photo when you're shooting RAW. You can really move stuff around in terms of, if your white balance is completely out to lunch. That's something I was fighting with this week is, we had some stuff where the white balance was like a few thousand kelvins off, and it falls apart when you try and fix that, unfortunately. If you shoot RAW video, you'll be able to save it, no problem at all. Or really do like extreme, if you want to go with a heavy blue tint, or suddenly your characters are in Mexico and for some reason the sky is green. I don't know why everyone does that, but you'll have that option. Then yes, you can do that with raw video, but everybody thinks that you'll see a giant quality bump, and that's not necessarily the case. Especially the biggest misconception is, I'll shoot raw video and I'll get access to a ton of dynamic range. Because in photos, that's absolutely the case. You're comparing a JPEG to a RAW file. But we have an in-between in video land, the log profile, which will generally capture all the dynamic range that the camera is capable of capturing. It does mean a lot more work in post, working with shadow noise, things like that, but your raw video is going to be noisy as well. So yeah, if you've got the time and the workflow to do it, shoot log video in H.264, and you're going to wind up with almost exactly the same image quality, if not identical image quality, to doing like giant external ProRes recording and running that through your workflow. You're not going to see a quality advantage at the end of the day, especially if you're going to upload it to a video streaming service like YouTube, which is just going to absolutely put your video quality in a headlock and give it a noogie.
Okay, you're done. You're done.
I did it.
You're done. Ted, do you want to add anything on there?
You even got a wrestling reference there at the end. I like that.
I'm staying on topic.
That's right. No, I won't add anything. I typically go to Jordan when I have questions.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you. Because there's more.
Well, there is an interesting thing there, because those are selling points back to marketing again with cameras. Oh, external ProRes RAW, isn't it? It's like, well, I got work to do, so I'm sorry. It's going to be H.264. I can't deal with raw video right now. So,
well, hey, who wants to hear more about the S5 IIX? Let's do it. John, Firewire. I have two questions for Jordan regarding the Panasonic S5 IIX. Does shooting in 24 hertz impact motion shutter in panning in video as opposed to 60 hertz when shooting 24p? I figure a slow sensor readout speed compared to instantaneous full readout would impact the cadence look as well, but not sure the components that make some cameras seem to maintain better image integrity when panning. Also, do you make use of the real-time baked-in LUT feature, or do you prefer to add vlog and post? I imagine this response will also be nerdy.
Yes, it's going to be extremely nerdy. First of all, the reason that you would shoot true 24 as opposed to 23.98, which is what most cameras, when you choose 24, it'll select that, is for sound sync. So if you're shooting all of your project on video, stick to 23.98. And really what's determining the judder effect is your shutter speed. So if you're shooting a 50th or a 48th of a second, it doesn't matter what your output frame rate is. The reason true 24 exists is to sync with motion picture film, which is actually capturing exactly 24 frames a second. If you're doing that, which is quite a niche use case, switch it over to capture at 24 frames per second. That'll still sync up. But if you're going to do a digital top to bottom workflow, leave it at 23.98, and the difference is going to be honestly imperceptible between the two of them. There are some people out there who, are like, I can absolutely see the difference between true 24 and 23.98. And I'm, I look at a lot of video all the time. I don't see that night and day difference. So for the most part, I wouldn't worry about that, especially in terms of like rolling shutter, things like that are not determined by your output frame rate at all. You'll get the same rolling shutter whether you're, 59.96 or PAL or true 24 frames per second. That's your sensors determining that. What was the last part of the question, Chris?
They want to know, do you make use of the real-time baked-in LUT feature, or do you prefer to edit log in post?
So the real-time LUT feature, if I say I'm doing what I am right now, where I'm streaming, it's not going to be graded. That can be cool if there's a look I really like. Like I could be I use Panasonic's nicest profile as my primary LUT. So I could drop that on it, and it's baked in. The downside is if I bake that in, I'm not going to have access to as much dynamic range when I'm in the edit. Yes. It's basically what you see is what you get. It's like a JPEG at that point. So if I need dynamic range, I'm shooting log. If I don't, I actually have a different profile I prefer, which is their like 709. So I'll shoot that. That's what I'm being filmed in right now. I find it's beautiful color. Looks great right out of camera. So no, I don't use that feature. But if you need everything to match, like if you're doing a live show where fairly high contrast was there, you could create a LUT, apply that to all the cameras, and it's going to look great. And now you have no work in post. But you're really saying, when you bake those in, you're saying, I'm throwing away a whole bunch of my flexibility to work with these files afterwards. And that's why I don't use it. And I'm done.
You're cut off. Okay. You're done. You're cut off.
I hope there's some photography questions next.
It's not actually. So our last tech support question we're going to get to is from Andy from Alaska. It's a speak pipe, so let's listen to Andy now.
Hi, Chris, Jordan, Jaron, love the pod. What value, if any, do fixed lens camcorders have on the market today? Are they still worth it for narrative and documentary filmmaking when there are so many other larger sensor, interchangeable lens, mirrorless cameras available? Thanks.
So thank you, Andy. Let's just add in also, hey, Chris, Jordan, and Jaron, and Ted, because Ted, you happen to be on here, and you could talk to this too. So another question.
It's another video question, guys.
I know.
How
fixed
about
lens camcorders?
I'll let you guys go first. How about that? I want to hear your sweet, sweet voices.
I mean, I used those at one point when I started my YouTube channel. I mean, that was the technology. It's like, the little toilet paper roll camcorders that Panasonic was making, and they were cool at the time. I hated them. I mean, but then the 5D came along, and then all of a sudden you could do full frame video, and that changed everything. So, although I do know video guys that still want to use those because it's what they're used to, and I think one of the benefits is it's massively, especially with smaller chips, you can get a wider zoom range in one camera and carry that around. And I think that is very important. And because when you're actually shooting, even when I'm doing B-roll, I want to mix up my focal lengths since that gives you more visual interest in the end.
Yeah. That's exactly the appeal.
I think there's actually a huge market for this still. I mean, interchangeable lens cameras, you can absolutely shoot a lot of documentary narrative work. I mean, when Jordan and I did our thing with Blair Bunting going up on the UT spy plane, the benefit there was we had multiple shooters, right? So we could tackle different focal ranges, different stories at the same time. But I think, as Ted said, the advantage of having fixed lens camcorders is you can be more of a one-person show and cover a lot. And there's still a lot of documentary narrative work where this happens. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is you think about TV series like the Alone series or Survivor series, where you're putting people out in the woods and obviously they don't have a camera crew on them, right? So they need a camera that they can operate easily, that doesn't take a lot of skill to operate, that has a big zoom range. You don't have to worry about moving parts as much. You could just plug it in at night and then unplug it and start shooting. And obviously those camcorders usually have really nice benefits for onboard microphones that patch right in and stuff. So I think the convenience of it, the image quality for documentary narrative work, to me, it's far more the subject matter. It's far more the storytelling than the actual image quality that matters. And frankly, I think there's still a lot of cachet for documentary and narrative work to have that camcorder look aesthetic to it, because I think people associate that with, it's real. I trust it. It's on the street kind of stuff. It's not produced. So I think there's something to be said for that as well. That being said, the market, I think, is in a big decline.
Yeah, it's very few people should use this because the quality will be lower than a big chip camera. You kind of touched on it. I think one of the biggest things is if you have a big sensor, your lenses need to be extremely refined in order to be able to zoom and maintain focus with it. A parfocal lens used to be a very common thing. Now, if you look at one, they're insanely expensive because they have to be absolutely perfect. Your depth of field is so small, where if you've got a tiny chip, you can throw a big zoom on there and actually be able to zoom while recording and not worry about the focus drifting on your subject. And that is, Chris touched on the aesthetic, the reality TV, The Bachelor, where someone says something crazy and then they rack in on the one girl who's like, oh no, she did not. And that is a look that
nobody says crazy things on The Bachelor.
Yeah.
It's all heartfelt and honest.
So I tried faking that recently in an episode, and I wound up stopping a micro four thirds camera down to f16. So now it's diffraction limited in order to be able to do a crash zoom in on Chris and maintain focus on him. So that's a big thing too. Yeah. If you want a huge zoom range and you want to be able to keep your subject in focus, that's where those are still useful. And that's why you see things like, Planet Earth, which is I don't know if it's still Planet Earth, but that whole BBC Wildlife team, they still use a lot of these, small sensor, huge zoom cameras for that exact reason.
Yeah. Okay. Enough video. No more video. Let's get to our never read the comments, and we'll talk about those next. Dustin Jenkins is first up, 8215. Something that's been completely missed in all of this GFX 102 sensor speed talk is that it shoots really high quality video. It must have a faster sensor in order to get the higher image quality and dynamic range for video shooting. Jordan, I believe you have a response to this.
I do. So basically the same thing that we found, and we didn't talk about this on last week's episode because Jim is a little bit more photocentric. Right. But yes, they do have the ability to shoot 4K and even 8K video on this camera. The problem is because it's that old sensor, it can't do it in its higher quality modes. So you've got a few options. First of all, if you're shooting video, it's dropping it to 12-bit mode, which is what most cameras do in order to give you that very fast readout. What I find hilarious is they brought out the XH2S APS-C camera, and they were like, this sensor is so fast, we can read it out in 14-bit mode for video, and it gave you just amazing dynamic range for that class of camera.
Yes.
And now we've got a much bigger, more expensive camera that is dropping to 12-bit. There's a sacrifice in every mode. You can record 8K, but it's going to use smaller than a full frame sensor area, in which case, why are you using a medium format camera?
Huge crop.
Or you can do full width 4K with it. But again, it's not oversampled. When you're doing that, it's binning. Now, it is giving you more than 8 megapixels on that 102 megapixel chip. But again, grab a full frame camera that's recording oversampled video, you're still going to be using more pixels. So it really comes down to like, do you want to use your Fujifilm medium format lenses to record 4K video? The image quality is not going to like totally outclass something with a smaller sensor, but you do have the option of doing that. Or if you want to use like older, large format cinema lenses, I know Fujifilm is saying like, yeah, you can use some of our, big for their larger format, like full frame cinema lenses on here and it'll cover. You have that option, but I don't think it's worth like buying the camera to get access to the incredible image quality of medium format. It's if you've got existing medium format lenses you want to take advantage of, you can with this.
This can shoot video.
But it's not going to outperform like a full frame camera with a stacked sensor. I think that's a really common misconception on it. And we're going to go into more detail because we have the camera now and we can finally review it.
There you go. Actually, Jordan, it's a lot of video questions here today. Charlie Waterman, 816, love the show as always. As a GFX 100S owner, my question is, besides the looks and feel of the Hasselblad, is the lens lineup any smaller or lighter, or is it really noticeable when compared? I guess that's not for you, but there's some other videos.
Yeah, this is for you and Ted.
Yeah, so, and Ted, I think you've got a lot to say about the Hasselblad as well. So I'll just touch on it like... the lens lineup for Hasselblad, I wouldn't say it's any smaller or lighter. They feel very similar. Certainly, they're beautiful looking. From an image quality standpoint, I mean, the Hasselblad lenses are excellent. I mean, there was even a time when Fujinon was making lenses for Hasselblad. But do you notice any comparison using the two systems?
It's weird because it's not I'd like to be apples to apples with that, but it's like there's certain Fuji lenses that are lighter and they kind of feel a little bit more plasticky, and Hasselblad has it too. Like the 45P is one of them. That's this, so it's not like there's a 45 in both systems, or that in general they're all. One of the problems that you're going to have inherently with medium format, and I think this is something that people. Well, the companies don't talk about it, but when you get into longer focal lengths like telephotos and stuff like that, because of the big sensor, those lenses get really big. And I like the Hasselblad lenses, like the 135 and then, the 80 millimeter f1.9. They're big lenses. They're big and chunky. Both systems, and they both have a lot to offer. I think that Fujifilm has a little bit of an edge if you want to do continuous shooting, stuff like that, because the autofocus algorithms support it where Hasselblad doesn't. But I prefer the Hasselblad cameras for a number of reasons: the ergonomics, the body style, the lenses. It's just more my thing. But I use those in a very different application. Like I wouldn't use it for street photography. They're typically more studio setup kinds of things, landscape, stuff that doesn't move. They're just, it would be hard to shoot a lot of fast motion on a Hasselblad. But
I think we could say like Fujifilm is definitely the more versatile medium format camera, which is probably why they're having so much success in the medium format world. Yeah. And they probably have more lenses now over Hasselblad.
They do. They have more lenses. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
One thing I think is absolutely essential to point out with this is the Hasselblad lenses have built-in leaf shutters, and you are paying a huge premium on those lenses to have that in there. So if you're going to take advantage of it, it's a fantastic thing. Like go shoot, outdoors with strobes. It gives you a lot of flexibility. But if you're not the kind of person who's going to take advantage of that, then you'll wind up with a far less expensive system in the Fujifilms. With their slow sync speed, but less expensive glass consistency.
And if you want to adapt non-native lenses, it doesn't make the Hasselblad's electronic shutter only at that point. Yeah. So not recommended. So it just depends on what your use case is. Yeah.
All right. We got another one here, an email. Don, great work on the podcast. I drive about 90 minutes to visit my son at college every Wednesday evening. Your podcast makes the time in a car much more enjoyable. We appreciate that, Don. Thank you. Keep up the great work. Also, I agree with Chris. The D750 is still an amazing camera.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks,
Don.
Don.
I love that. Oh,
there we go. Okay, so that's it for all of our comments. Last thing I do want to mention, Jaron will be back next week, and there's a lot of uncertainty and misunderstanding about cryptographic signatures on photos, and I think that's actually really important to learn about in today's world. So we're going to talk about that next week. Even in our own team, we don't have all the facts and understand it, but Jaron does. So he's going to be back, and he's going to discuss it. So if you guys have any specific questions or comments about cryptographic signatures on photos, definitely leave those now, because Jaron will then see them and we could talk about them next week. It'll be good to have him back. But Ted, it was great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Can I make money with a cryptographic signature? It sounds like a coin, right? It's a coin.
But you can tell all your friends about cryptographic signatures, and then they will block you stat.
Right.
Yes.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. This has been fun. It is always a joy to hang out with the both of you, and today was no different. So thank you very much for having me. It's quite an honor.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming, and it was great to get you back on the show. Again, yes, Jaron will hopefully be back with us next week. So I just want to say, all the best, Jaron. I know he's going through some tough stuff right now. And everybody, a little tact in the comments this week would probably be appreciated. I just want to throw that out there as well. So,
and as always, though, thank you for listening to us. Thank you to OM System for being the sponsor and making the show possible. And leave comments. We love to answer the tech support. We love to do the never read comments, maybe less video comments, and tech support, just to give Jordan a break, but we'll appreciate whatever you guys give us. So thanks so much. See you guys. See you, Ted.
Bye-bye.
See you, Jordan. Bye.